Okay, so welcome back, everybody. Today we are going to be demystifying women's wisdom, sexuality, and healing through pain, a feminist woman's perspective. It's going to be something. And we're going to be doing all this with our smart guest, Dr. Ayu Saraswati. Welcome back, Ayu. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you again so much for allowing me to be in this space with you and for inviting me to have a chat with you. It sounds like it's going to be a fun and hopefully insightful conversation today.
Yeah, and to all our listeners, you notice I say welcome back because we had a little bit of a glitch. And I'll tell you guys before we jump right in that Ayu, smart sister over here, knows a little something about grace, okay? So we're going to jump in, and I think let's start with something that might seem obvious to a lot of people, but maybe to new listeners, not so much. Because, when we talk, I've noticed, doing all these shows, I've noticed that when we talk about women's stuff, especially the stuff that is not common knowledge or dinner table conversation, it tends to make people feel some kind of way, So let's start by, talking about some of the common misconceptions and stereotypes surrounding women's wisdom, sexuality, and experiences of dealing with trauma and pain that you, with your experience, believe needs to be addressed.
So, oh my gosh, that's like 3 different books all in itself. And I wrote one book just on pain that just came out recently. And there's another book about sexuality. The one thing I think that is, it's not so much a misconception, but it is, I guess, a perception that needs to be challenged is that women's sexuality, when it is liberated, it is dangerous, right? And also when they are reclaiming their power through pain, is also dangerous. Again, and also women's wisdom. It is sometimes when we are being wise in a way that can see things clearly, that there is clarity in our seeing and our ways of living, that could also be dangerous. So I'm just going to put the word or attach the word dangerous to all 3 things that you just said to make it both, because that is the truth, or at least my truth, in, as you said, in my own experience. And I don't know if that is the experience that you also have been exposed to. But there is something to be said about what it means to embrace that, I'm going to say womanhood. I know that womanhood does not only mean cis woman. So I just want to be clear and open about that. That, womanhood could mean so many different things and be embodied by different people and genders. But when we are claiming that there is so much danger in that claiming that position of womanhood. But this is where I really am committed to, is to really seeing that it is only dangerous when people see our power as a threat. So let's start there and let's have a conversation about that.
Yeah, let's take it away, because what I have come to learn, you posed the question to me as well. My experience has been that a woman who embodies the wholeness of who she is, with all the knowledge, some which I have come to learn was intentionally hidden. It wasn't mistakenly hidden, it was intentionally hidden. And others was misconstrued and inverted. and so it's all such a gumbo. But what I've come to learn is when a woman has unraveled a lot of this knowledge, and when she has come to herself, and she's with a partner or wherever space she's in the family, in the workplace, wherever, those who can appreciate a whole woman, they love it. But those who have benefited from her shortcomings and from her lack of knowledge of self see her as a threat. Am I wrong in this observation?
That's amazing. And I think, thank you for that reminder too, that, and even one person can see this other person, right, as both empowering and threatening at the same time, like what you're saying, right? There are like moments in one's life. I may see you right now as empowering because we are having this conversation, but then some other times I may be thinking through the lens of patriarchy or whatever that is, and I see you as a threat, as intimidating, as whatever, right? So I think it's a very important point that you're bringing up, that it's more complex than just sort of saying, oh, this person is a threat or as a source of power. So I really, really like that. And I think too, like when we think about sort of even like when we feel about ourselves, sometimes we feel, I'm a feminist and I teach women's studies, I'm a professor in it, right? And all of that. Even I too sometimes feel all of these things that are around us. And I want to go back to something that you said, again, another very important point that you brought up, which is a lot of this knowledge is not something that we just don't know, but that it is systematically or systemically hidden. And actually, there is this amazing article by Nancy Tuana. The title is "Coming to Understand," and I love this title because it is about female orgasm, right? It is about coming, so it's like brilliant. That's why I love that title. But also, it is about epistemology. It is about understanding, right? That's why I that title is so brilliant. Coming to understand. But the idea or the argument of the article is that it isn't that we don't know a lot about female orgasm, like you said, right? It's not that we don't know, but that knowledge about female orgasm has been erased, or in your words, hidden, right, from public knowledge. That there is this system in place about not teaching us. I mean, by us, I'm talking not only women or girls, but
everybody.
Genders, about female orgasm. About female ejaculation, which is different from female orgasm, right? And so we don't know because there is.
I know somebody just wrote that down, like different.
Yeah. Yes, right.
It is different.
Yeah. So again, this is in some ways it is about how can then we think about the ways in which. What are some of the knowledge out there you're talking about? You use the word wisdom, which I love. That is out there, that is being hidden, that is being erased, from textbooks, right? Medical textbook, from, our classrooms, from media, when most of the sources, and thanks to the internet, pornography is not the only way we learn about, orgasm. But again, if we think about it also, a lot of that we learn about male orgasm, right? Cis male orgasm, but not a lot about, female orgasm. And so if we kind of like look at porn and then think about, oh, what's wrong with me? Like, why can't I like do all these things that, right, that we see in pornography, that is not feminist pornography, then again, there is a system in place that make us not know about things. So thank you for bringing those very important points.
Yeah, because I've just come to see that, and when you talk, everything you're talking about applies to both men and women. The threat. There are women who are threatened by other women embodying who they are. And they become the gatekeepers, and we know the whole spiel. So men, we're not talking only to you, we're talking to everybody here, just so you know. But as you were talking about you were taking me through the evolution of even just having this conversation, like you said, even talking about this, because it is a form of empowerment, But in your experience, what have you seen as the evolution? Is it a progression or a regression?
There is, again, I'm just going to
In
quote
when we talk about
a bunch
female
of different
sexuality.
people about including women's movement in general, because I think every issues that we're talking about are related to the movement, right? The women's movement in general or at large, is that we can't really think of history or movement or single issue or multiple issues in that sort of linearity, because when we think about progression and regression, it's kind of like this linear, there's like this line going this way, progression, or this way, regression, right? And Kathy Ferguson, who happens to be my brilliant colleague here at the University of Hawaii, she talks about how movement, right, including women's reproductive rights, that it's like a spiral, right? That it's not, and I do this, and which makes it seem like there's a direction this way or that way, but it's sort of like, and by doing that, maybe I should like just making this kind of movement, because there isn't really like a particular sort of like direction, because sometimes we get, or like we're surprised by things like the rights to abortion in the United States, right? But the thing is, she said, we shouldn't be surprised, because it isn't just a progression. It isn't just like once we have the rights to have an abortion, then we will always have it, right? Which is like kind of like the progression or regression. Now we don't have it anymore, to a certain extent. So by way of moving beyond this sort of like linearity, progression or regression, then we can always think about something as something that's always fluid and dynamic, and something that we have to keep working on, that we have to keep an eye on, like constantly, including sexuality, right? Because yes to gay rights, and then no to gay rights. Like, what's going on? I thought we've moved past that. But again, she reminds us that no, we cannot think that way. We cannot think like, oh, we've passed that. No, we always have to keep an eye on that. We always have to see like what's going on, because again, the people who are in power are dynamic. The people who are part of our society are dynamic. The values are dynamic, right? And so we always have to constantly take a sort of like a temperature control, so to speak, like where are we at? Yes, women know more about their sexuality, but then there will be some point when, what? We don't know? Like, what's going on? So I think, to answer your question, in terms of the evolution, it has been sort of, I would say like up and down, and the spiral ways of being in all aspects of, genders and sexualities. And people, again, talking about genders, people talk about third genders, or people talk about beyond the binary gender as if this just came right now, right? This is like, or worse, Western, invention. But if we look at different societies at different times before colonialism, even in Hawaii, right, there is this mahu, right? In India, there's like this hijra, right? Like all of these things.
What is the mahu? Tell us about the mahu.
Yeah. So mahu in Hawaii is this sort of like I shouldn't say third gender, because it isn't, but I'm using it to allow us to understand it's beyond this binary of men and women. It's people who are assigned male at birth, but live their life as women. And again, I say all of these things with kind of like reluctance, because
I know where you're going, Ayu, and I know the choice of language.
Exactly,
yeah,
right?
I'm sorry, we have to speak. You
Yes,
know,
exactly. That's why
I
I
get this
use
all
the
the time when
language.
I use certain words. And people are like, how can I'm like, look, what words? You know, we have to
Exactly,
speak. We have
exactly,
to say something. We do understand the biology. We understand
exactly,
the you know, the different, you know, we understand all that. But we
exactly.
gotta talk, okay? Just
Exactly.
putting that
That's
up.
why I always kind of like, oh,
I know where you're coming from with that.
yes,
Just flow with it, you know.
exactly, exactly. So I do always want to create that rupture though. And when I say rupture, like you said, sometimes it's always good to go with the flow. And I do want to go with the flow. At the same time, I want to create that rupture of narrative, meaning that I will tell you a story, like, and we're in the flow, and then I create that rupture. I create like moments when I say, oh, but it's not exactly that. It is third gender, but it is not exactly that. And that's why we use these words, so that there is a word for that. That's the brilliance of it, that there is a word for that prior to colonialism, prior to our gender binary here. But I think you get the point of what Mahu is. It's
Yeah, yeah.
understanding that is beyond binary, and how it is accepted to be Mahu, and they are also what we call here Kumu, which are teachers, right? So in other words, they're not being stigmatized in the way, well, obviously in some ways because of where where we're at right now. There are moments, obviously, when Mahu in Hawaii these days, I'm talking about, are being stigmatized. I don't want to dismiss that, but in some ways, the understanding of Mahu, that who can be teachers, in Hawaiian sort of like context, needs to be acknowledged as well, I think.
Yeah, you took my mind so many places. I just want to let you know that.
Yay!
And when you were doing your hands, you were doing the spiral
Yeah.
going up, and then you went around it, and I was like, okay, hold on a minute, because I just had a guest, a wonderful lady who talks about the more esoteric and spiritual aspects of
Mhm.
things, but she also uses a lot of science and the good stuff to back it up. And she
Mhm.
was talking about the serpentine spiral that goes up.
Mhm.
This is so when you were doing that, I was thinking of the serpentine spiral. And then when you were going round like this, I was thinking about the Fibonacci, the math spiral. And you were combining both the spirals. And I was like, okay. Do you also look into the spirituality side of things and how it intersects with women's wisdom? I don't know. Yeah, sexuality and
Yeah. So
everything we've been talking about.
in my own life, I do,
Hmm.
but in my research, I have not done that in the way that I would like. So, in other words, I don't really it. From time to time, like in my latest book, Scarred: A Feminist Journey Through Pain, I do talk about a Buddhist sort of understandings of
Hmm.
things, including perception, right?
Hmm.
Because one of the things, so in my book, I'm just going to dive into my latest
Yeah,
book
yeah.
right now.
It's a good segue.
So in my book, I talk about 4 things that we can sort of practice in our daily lives to live with pain differently. And by differently, I mean in a way that is more enchanting, that is more life sustaining for us. So my book is not about, if you do these 4 things, you're going to be pain free. Not at all. Actually, I'm saying that we need pain, that the pain is going to be here. Pain is going to stay. I know it sounds depressing, but
No, it is not. Ah.
but but
Mhm.
but the idea is, if pain is gonna be here, it's gonna hang out, it's here to stay, then how can we live with it in a way that actually supports us? Does that make sense? Like the difference, right? One
It
is
does make sense because this will force you to understand the pain, understand the cause. I think the problem is saying, oh, I'm in pain, but what is that? I think that's what I'm getting from you. It's
yeah,
not, we don't know enough about pain. We just think, oh, pain, it's sad, it's horrible. But you're putting us in a position of, you need to look at it and analyze it. Don't look at it, oh, pain, I get it. Find out what it is, then you can figure it out, and it's not a problem anymore. It's just a
Yeah,
way of life, isn't it?
that's exactly what I love about what you're saying. And actually, in fact, in a different podcast interview, I actually mentioned this example of like pain as a person. If pain were your best friend, or you would like pain to be your, let's say, friend, do you actually know who pain is? What does pain like? What does pain not like? When does pain like to hang out with us? When does pain not like to hang out with us, right? What is pain's favorite color, right? And so what is pain's favorite music? Oh, I know that. When I'm in pain, I have my pain list, and I blast it out, and I just start crying. I do whatever with it, right? So I love that. I love that. And so yes, 100% that we need, and that is the invitation in my book, is that we, let's get to know pain a little bit better, right? That is the invitation of the book. Let's, because my pain is different from your pain, just like my person is different from your person, right? They like different things. And so again, my book is not that kind of like, okay, so here are the 4 things that you do, and if you do all these things, magical things will happen. Magical things will happen, but not because you do these all 4 things. These 4 things are just like a launch pad for you to do your 4, 6, 8, 100 things that your pain and you like, if that makes sense. But going
Yeah.
back to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I totally get you, because I think this can be applied to almost all the spectrums of emotions, including anger and everything that people say this is bad. No, there is righteous anger. There's the anger that gets you to the gym. There's the anger that makes you change, things. So it depends. I like what you're saying, the way we express the pain, the way we take the pain. What pains me doesn't pain you. Some people can be abused, insulted, and they're like, whatever. But for you, it may hurt you really deeply and cause you lifelong trauma, the same exact experience. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I totally get you. So the 4 things that you talk about, it makes sense that you can all do the same thing, but you will get a different outcome because we're different.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Come up with your own 4 or whatever that is. But
Yeah.
before I go through the 4 things, you talk about anger. And again, women's anger is one of those things that we talked about earlier, which is when we are angry. Oh, wow. That is so dangerous. Like that is so threatening for other people. So therefore, women's anger needs to be repressed. And obviously, I'm not talking about anger where you harm people or things,
Of course
or
not.
beyond
Yeah.
all of that, but just like being angry for not being treated with respect, with the kinds of things, things like that. Anyway, I agree with that. So the 4 things. The first thing is about perception, is about the mind, right? So I'm just gonna go through this very quickly, and then I'm gonna go through them in more in depth. So the first thing is the mind, which is the perception. The second thing is the body, right? So we go from the mind to the entire body. So that's number 2, is working with the body. And number 3 is, so after the mind, after the body, which is here, we want to work with our environment, which is, where we move through this world, right? And so the mind, the body, and then how we, bring this body, within our environment, right? So that's the third thing. The fourth thing is we can't only look at ourselves, because a lot of the time, and the self-help movement have been helpful, and I also follow their books and things like that. I'm going to say what I say next, not to dismiss, the helpful things that they've done, okay? But self-help only helps the self. But a lot of the pain in this world comes not from the self, but from the structure, from patriarchy, from the system that gives us pain. And therefore, number 4, we can't only focus on our mind, our body, and how we move through the environment, but we also have to ask the policies of the countries where we live. Could be the policies of the country. It could be the policies of the workplace where we work. It could be the policies of the town, of the state where we live, and how they help us carry that pain in a way that is more life sustaining for us. So those are the four: the mind, the body, how we bring this body into, kind of like the environment within us, and then the structure that influences how this body lives in this world. Okay, so that's the fourth thing, and I'm going to explain this. And the first one directly answers your question about spirituality. And again, I do more like spiritual work for my own self, in my own personal sort of realm. But in the book, I talk about one, which is the perception and the ways in which a lot of the time we perceive in a way that considers a perspective that is this person, that is Ayu. But in Buddhism, there is no such thing as Ayu. Buddhism, there is this thing called non-self. There is no self. There is no Ayu. There is no self. And therefore, the perception will also always be like Maya, or like, what do you call it? Like changing, or like virtual. I'm just going to use the word virtual, which means that it always shifts, right? The perception, because there is no Ayu to begin with, there is no self to begin with. The way that we perceive things will also shift. The perception is not, absolute.
No, it's not.
Now,
No.
this is no absolute. And to even like, I know it might sound, for people who are not familiar with it, like, what do you mean there is no self? There is Ayu, there is self. I want things. I love things. I dislike things, right? But when you think about it, how you were when you were 5 years old, I hope it's going to be different from you are when you're 40 years old, right? Doesn't mean that there are no aspects of like the 5-year-old. I hope it's the playfulness. I hope it's the, curiosity of a 5-year-old that you bring with you, right? But also, even in my 40-year-old self, when I'm dealing with you right now, maybe I will talk about different things. I will act in a different way versus when I'm in front of the classroom, right? Versus when I'm going to a Buddhist temple or like whatever, right? And so even that self is constantly changing.
Oh, I get you now.
Constantly changing as well. But the thing is, if the way from where I perceive changes, then you who I perceive are changing too, right? And so when I think, oh, you're mean, well, you may say mean things 5 seconds ago, but you probably will not, hopefully not, a year from now or like 10 years ago, right? So you're changing, I'm changing, and therefore the perception, right? Well, gotta change. How could the perception, like this is me and that's you, I'm changing, you're changing. How I see you is fixed? Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense to me.
And I got that from Buddhism, right? And the thing is, and they argue as well, or I shouldn't say argue, but they, I guess one of their teachings is that a lot of suffering come from perception that we think is true when it isn't, right? Because you were mean just now, but you weren't mean 10 years ago. So how could I say that you were mean? So that's not true. Does that mean, well, anyways. So
yeah, it does make sense.
From
but I think the degrees that vary.
Absolutely.
You agree with me with that? The degrees vary, because and I know people may not agree with what we're saying, because people love their comfort zone, and that's why you hear the comments people make that, oh my God, she's changed. Like, duh, of course she's changed.
I hope she's changed.
She's supposed to, it's normal, right? But we hear that all the time, like, oh, she's different now, and I'm like, that's good, but not for everybody. And I get it. People love the comfort zone, and change is uncomfortable. We get it. But when you were talking about perception, I agree with you. I think I can see where you're coming from, but I can also see where perception sometimes may be inflexible. You can agree or disagree with me. I'm cool with that. It can be like very difficult based on your culture or your religious background, and it doesn't matter what you think you're looking at. It just already is decided. This is the group perception. We're all in agreement that this is what we see. It goes beyond just Ayu. If you know what I mean, because I see this play out.
That is what I'm challenging in my book. That is exactly
Okay.
what I'm challenging in my book. And I argue that a lot of the pain in our lives actually come from perceiving in a way that society wants us to perceive. And in the book, I call this docile perception, right? So we are
Oh,
actually being taught how to perceive. So docile perception, a lot of the time, not always. Again, nothing is absolute. Nothing is the only thing, the only way. That a lot of the time, docile perception, because it is a disciplined way of perceiving, meaning someone teaches us how to perceive, lead us to pain and suffering. And so what I'm proposing in my book is what I call defiant perception. So this has become my mantra now. When I feel in pain, or when I feel hurt, or suffering, things like that, the first mantra that I ask is, how can I perceive differently, or how can I perceive in defiant ways? Here's an example. Docile perception, because my first book is about beauty, looks like this. The society teaches me that to be beautiful, I have to be this skinny. My society in particular, I was born and raised in Indonesia and only later on moved to the United States. And my first book deals with this, which is whitening cream,
oh
skin whitening
God.
products. What does that mean?
What?
That means in Indonesia at the time, to be pretty, to be beautiful, to be desirable, and as women, you want to be desirable, that you have to be not only skinny, you also have to have light skin. And so docile perception looks like when we look at ourselves in the mirror and then we just gain weight and then we feel bad. Oh no, I shouldn't have had that like extra slice of pizza, right? Or whatever. And that brings us, kind of like that feeling of like, oh, I don't like my body, and things like that. Or, oh, my skin is darker now. I shouldn't have like swam. And actually, that's one of the most common things that I learned from the interviews for my book, is that women started to not want to be outside because they didn't
Oh
want
yeah.
their skin to get darkened, right? And so they would like, oh, I look ugly today, right? And so that's a way of perceiving our body, our face, that is docile, that is based on what people are telling us. So that's docile. But here's another docile perception that people may find surprising. Positive thinking is docile, right?
I know.
And you're like, what? But it's
We talk
good.
about it on this platform all the time. We talk about love and light, and we are like, get to work.
Right? Right?
I'm sorry. It doesn't. The child is hungry. You have 5 freezers and a fridge. Just get
Yes.
the food, take it outside, and then you can do the love and light later.
Yes.
But I want all our sisters, our smart sisters and women from Africa, from Asia, Japan especially. I'm talking to you ladies who do the skin lightening thing. Listen to this. It's really, that's a whole show as well. And
Yes.
Africa as well, you're doing it as well. And that's a whole other show. It's not just about beauty, like she said. It goes deeper into the cells, into the biology, into the health, into the mindset. It's a lot of things, into the psyche, into the trauma, into a lot of things. So you opened a nice box with a chunk of goodies that I think people should really look into. And the docile perspective is it's in full motion. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
But take it away. Mm-hmm.
yeah, so we were talking about positive thinking, right, as
Mm.
a way of perceiving in docile ways, and that is because all we change, and it positive thinking is also taught in a way that, okay, instead of feeling ugly when we gain weight or when we like look at ourselves and oh my god, our skin, is darker now, we are taught to say, I am beautiful, right? I am, oh my God, this is amazing face. No matter how you feel inside, fake it till you make it, right? And so
Girl, Ayu, we gotta fake it till we make it. Come
I
on.
know, right? It's like, okay, hold on, calm down. And so again, I understand that people may like attack me for this, for saying
No,
that
no one is gonna attack you. We
thinking
have really the coolest
is a
people on this
form,
platform.
is a
Yeah.
form of a docile, that positive thinking is a form of docile perception. And then the antidote to that, or what I propose, what we do instead, is defiant perception. Defiant perception is about first understanding, oh, that's a form of docile perception. We were taught, right, to think that way. Because again, when we are in pain, when we feel bad about ourselves, when we feel hurt, and I feel this too. When I feel sad, when I feel hurt, when I'm in pain, I feel like I don't want to do anything. All I want to do is lay in bed, maybe go out to get some ice cream. I do love ice cream, and or chocolate, make myself feel better that way. But the thing is, that's why bullies bully us. They want to make us feel that pain so much so that we don't want to do anything. Pain is one of the most efficient tool to make others subsume to our power, right? And so when we as women look at ourselves in the mirror and say, oh my God,
Wow.
I'm like ugly. I feel bad. I don't want to go out today. I don't have self-confidence. That's what they want. Like for you to like feel bad about yourself, not doing anything and not right. That's why I call it docile, or you call it docile, right? In some ways, it is to make you docile. It is make you
Yeah.
submissive. It
Oh
is the
my
kind of
God,
perception that
are
makes you
you?
docile,
Mhm.
right? And therefore, what you want to do is you have to defy that perception. You have to defy. So when you look in the mirror and you think, my God, I'm so ugly, and you say to yourself, where did I learn to feel or to think or to see this face as ugly, right? We have to
Yeah.
question the system. We have to question our friends who complimented us. And this still happens in Indonesia. And I was just home actually last week. And when I, go there and they say, oh, you look prettier. Your skin is lighter now. Maybe because you're in America now, right? And so I'm like, okay.
Wow.
And so
And
when
that's what we
they come,
mean, are you? You don't know what you don't know until you know.
absolutely,
And
absolutely,
they probably think they're making your day.
absolutely,
They probably think they're saying the nicest thing ever.
absolutely, absolutely. And that is
And,
why
and in, yeah, and
talk.
the compliment is one of the biggest insults.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm trying to say is that we learn about all of this from the trivial things in our lives, including compliments. And
But
like
they
you
mean
said,
well. I know they do mean well. I know the programming. Like I know they genuinely are telling you something they think is going to make your day.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And
Mm.
this is why it's so important that we write books, that we have this kind of podcasts, that we undo that systemic violence in terms of epistemology. Again,
Ooh.
epistemology means how do we know what we know, right? Like what you say, if you don't know, then you don't know.
No,
But
you
then,
just don't know. Yeah.
exactly. But how is it that we don't know about it, right? Maybe because books like the one I wrote, it's not the kind of books that will be included at schools, right? The kinds of books that challenge the status quo are not the kinds of book that we learn in, classrooms or things like that, right?
And we do know why, are you? Everything you have said today, if women listen to it and they embrace it and they take it to heart and then move into action, there's a lot of people who will lose a lot of money.
absolutely,
Think about the skin lightening business. Think about the cosmetic, the dieting pills, all this stuff. It's a business built on the pain, subjugation, skewing of the perception on the view of women on self, the surgeries. Here in Denmark, I'm sorry I put you all on blast, but here in Scandinavia, you have young girls, as young as, 18, 19, 20, and they're having plastic surgery, anti-aging. I'm like, what? You have, and so it's starting earlier. That's why I know we don't want to go linear, but you're talking about some very important topics here because it's moving younger and younger and younger. I don't understand that. That's why I think my mind was set on regression or progression because of what I see here in the Nordics. I'm seeing, I never, anti-aging, I know it was a problem, but it was happening with women in their 60s, 70s, but now not in their, 20s,
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe just talk a little bit about the connection between, I know we're talking about perception, but the marketing of perception, and also the way women can overcome. And I want you maybe to help us override the program. Is there a way we can override the system?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's where I was going with the docile versus defiant perception is, like you said, right? We have to first defy that perception. We have to question that, where did we learn this? And a lot of the time it's from advertisements. But other times, one of the examples that I mentioned earlier were just our peers, our friends who compliment us, who say nice things to us so that we will do more of what they say, right? But a lot of it is also from the education system, from the media. And what is dangerous right now, and I shouldn't use the word dangerous, because in some ways maybe it's just problematic, is that it's not that the media is no longer kind of like this one conglomerates of powerful people, right? Because now with social media, the media and the systems of representation are also in our hands, right? Literally in our cell phone. But the thing with that is sometimes, and what I notice in terms of social media is that we come in with all of this perception, with the perspective that we've also been taught in terms of the skin color, in terms of race, in terms of sex, in terms of, classism, all of these things, right? And so what happens is that even our friends who are not part of the media giant, who may not directly benefit from certain ideas because they're not the ones selling the skin lightening cream, right, are also posting in certain ways that perpetuate ideas of the lighter, the better. For example, they use filter, that camera app that makes their skin looks brighter, looks lighter, right? So that's like an example that is just super easy. So the answer to that, and what you're saying, how can we override all of these things, is to defy that perception and to really question what is going on, where we learn, and then to act based on that and to feel based on that. So in my first book, the title is Seeing Beauty, Sensing Race in Transnational Indonesia. I talk about how power works through emotions. In other words, those who are in power make us subjugated and whatever through the emotions that we are feeling. Why? Because when we feel something, we feel that it comes from here. When I see you as beautiful, nobody can say, oh, I don't, even when someone say, oh, I don't think, they're pretty. And I will say, well, according to my eyes, they are. In other words, emotions feel very personal, that it's just from here. It's natural. That ideology doesn't influence our emotions. But I'm saying in my first book, that's wrong. And so the first thing that we can do when we feel bad about ourselves, when we feel ugly, is to not feel how they want us to feel. It's just like bullies. When bullies tell you, you're ugly, you're stupid, like whatever, like all of these words that obviously are meant to harm you, you make that kind of like conscious sort of like decision, not about positive thinking though, but this is about defying, like they want us They want us to kind of like be afraid of them so that we are like, we stay in our lane. But we say, no, we're not going to feel ugly just because you tell us these are the women who look pretty and I'm not one of those, right? And so it is, first of all, it is to feel, to be conscious, to be aware of what we're feeling, and to understand how these ideologies, how the media, how different systems are making us feel that way, which is ugly, not good, not pretty, not smart, whatever. And to defy that, feeling, and to defy that, understanding. And then we can go outside and sort of like have that conversation when our friends say, oh, I don't look good in this. Oh, this outfit make me look fat. And that's when you can also engage in a conversation with them to invite them to defy the perception that they're also being taught. So that's the first thing of the four things that I talk about, which is the perception, right? And so we need to challenge, we need to defy all of these things that we are being taught, how to live, how to perceive, right? How to relate to one another. Anyway, so that's the first thing is perception, moving from docile perception to defiant perception.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing, so that's the mind. The second thing is the body. Working with the body, but without the story. And what do I mean by without the story? Here's the thing. In American culture or on TVs or on films, you've seen a lot when people are sad or when something happens, people say, if you want to talk about it, I'm here, right? So it's about talking. Talking is about stories. Stories is about perception. And perception is things that we are being taught and we can challenge, right? But there's a limit to language. And actually, that reminds me of the conversation we had earlier today about, I want to say this, but not really, because language, really is limiting, right? And that's the point of the second thing that we can do about pain, which is language can be limiting. Stories can be limiting.
It's so
Even
limited. Mm.
feminist discourse, right? The language within or like stories, understandings within feminism can be limiting, right? Why? Because a lot of the time we feel things, we don't even know what it is. In terms of, I feel, is it sad? Is it happy? I don't know. I feel things in my body, but I can't really verbalize it. And sometimes we just stuff it in, right? And so to really work with our pain, we want to work with our body, but without the story. So one of the examples that I brought up in my book is when I went to Nepal and I went to this ashram and we did this, it's called no mind therapy. And what it is for the first hour, we would do this gibberish. We would do like, ah, 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 right? And so the idea is when we're like saying things that nobody understands, that even our brain doesn't understand, it will resurface emotions that is buried within our bodies, that talking about it will not get us to that deeper emotion, right? So we're like, doing all this gibberish and then somehow when we work with our body would like do things that we didn't realize we want to do. Like for example, like someone would do like this stabbing things, right? Like who does this person want to stab, right? But in some ways we're supposed to like live. Sometimes we have this idea, oh my God, I want to kill this person, right? But obviously we cannot express that. We cannot feel that. And that gets down here. But through this sort of like working with the body, when we do this, we know we're not really doing it. We're not killing anybody. We're not harming anybody, right? So because again, that's the most important thing of all of this is we're not harming anybody, including ourselves, right? So when the body moves, and when there is story, when we say, oh, this is the person I want to kill, you have to drop that story. So every time the story comes, oh, my life sucks because this person did this to me. Drop that story. Keep moving, whatever that is. And when I did that, something shifted, right? We had to do that. It's a 7-day program. So we did that throughout the 7 days, throughout the week. And then what I noticed, it wasn't just my sadness. At one point, I was like crying. At another point, I was laughing. I was laughing so hard. And I was like, you know what? I did not realize that there was so much joy in my body that I also repress. And as women, I don't know about you and the culture within which you grew up, but where I grew up, women were not supposed to laugh out loud. And even
Oh,
sometimes, even now, when I laugh, I like do this, right? Because
oh,
it's like an unconscious thing about the body. Because good women, we're not supposed to be loud, like laughing out loud. We're not supposed to speak like me, like I'm like loud. It's like
oh,
everything, right?
wow.
Right. And so I didn't realize that there's so much joy. And sometimes we feel guilty. Remember, power works through emotions, right?
It does, because in my culture, laughter is beautiful. It is
Yeah,
celebrated.
that's amazing.
And I learned something from one of my amazing guests. It was a spirituality talk we had, and she told me that laughter can cleanse out your whole energy.
Oh, I
It's a
totally believe that.
purifier. It's a
Laughter is medicine.
energetic instant, can flip
Yeah.
you from whatever, but yeah, so it's interesting that they suppress laughter. And I
Well,
know
loud laughter, like
loud
loud
laughter, yeah.
laughter, loud. So
But
as
that
women,
loud laughter is the one. Apparently, it has a frequency and a vibration that can blast out anything that's negative.
yeah,
That and the laughter of babies.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And
Oh,
I want
they're
to run because we have to be conscious of the time, right? And you have 2 more
yes.
to go.
Oh my gosh. Yes, thank you. And so that's the body and how we can like work with the body without the story. So number 3 is what I call feminist enchantment. And so my invitation is for everyone to practice feminist enchantment in their daily lives, meaning you put yourself in positions where you can be enchanted. One for me is because I live in Hawaii, I would like sit right before sunset, and I would just see how sunset would enchant me. And then,
You need to stop. It's winter over here. You're not really
yes,
helping my spirit.
yes, yes, absolutely. And so in the book, I talk about Iceland. I visited Iceland. So my book is based on me visiting 20 countries in 1 year and how that helped me come up with all of these ideas about pain, how to live with pain in a way that is more enchanting. That's why the word enchanting, life sustaining, and things like that. And so I was seeing northern lights in Iceland. That was the whole purpose. And how when you saw things like that, or when you see sunsets and certain things, it's just like it grabs you from this moment and take you to like a different moment. That allows you to be taken by this beauty, like you said, right? But like you said, laughter can also be enchanting, right? Because when you said baby's laughter, I could totally be absorbed. I have a 2-year-old niece, and she's so amazing. And my brother sometimes send me video of her just laughing, and it's so enchanting to just like I would just be absorbed
It's
in
magical.
so
Mhm.
absolutely. So that's
Mhm.
the third thing. And my apologies for going through this now very, very
No, I love it because it allows you to unpack different things. And everything hits people differently. Someone may be okay in all the other 3 areas, but they're like, I need a little bit of enchantment in my life.
absolutely.
So it's perfect.
So
Yeah.
the invitation is to practice
Yeah.
feminist enchantment daily in our lives. And the fourth thing, the last thing, is what I call emotional contract. Because, and I'm not talking about like one that you literally sign, but this is sort of, what do we have? And so in the book, I only talk about the country, like I talk about that I mentioned earlier, which could be in the form of healthcare. Right? Does the government provide you with good healthcare? And by healthcare, not just physical, but mental healthcare. Does your government provide you with all of these, the system, the support that you need when you get sick or before you get sick? What are some of the programs that they have? And as you know, in the United States, we're struggling to have, accessible healthcare that is good for all, right? Things like that. So I talk about healthcare. I talk about programs for immigrants, for new immigrants when they come to this new country. Obviously, it's frightening. It could be scary. But what are the programs in place? right, that support people who just, came to this country. The third thing is I talk about paid parental leave. Again, in the United States, we're still struggling with that. But when we have new members in our, in our family, what are some of the programs that the government have to assure us of the well-being of ourselves as well as the new member of our families, right? So those are some of the emotional contract that I talk about. Basically, it is the contract between us and the government, or between us and the workplace. For example, at your work, what are some of the programs and policies that they have that assure your well-being, that assure you that you have, good access? And this is actually the word that I use. Emotional contract is about democratizing access to well-being. Right?
Democratizing access?
Access to well-being.
Democratizing
Yeah,
access.
democratizing
Okay.
access to well-being. What that means is that, the self-help, the self-love movement talk about, get a massage, right? Take care of yourself, self-care. And I'm talking about, okay, if you want to talk about self-care, if you want to talk about getting massages, if you want to talk about giving, if you want to talk about people taking retreats, right, that could rejuvenate them, then does everybody have this? That's why it's democratizing access. Do people have access to that? Or only few people can have access to massages? Or only few people can go to beautiful retreats where their souls are being held, right? And so that's what I mean by emotional contract.
Wow. Yeah.
Is it
And I
being,
think you have you make such a good point, especially when it comes to companies in the workplace, because a lot of people, they have all this beautiful stuff in theory,
absolutely.
but the application of this stuff is almost zero.
And
You
this
know,
can also be done with your partner, right? Your life partner, someone you live
yeah.
with in the home. Like when I'm in pain, what are some of the things that we have in place, agreement like that contract, how you can support me and how I can support you, how we can support each other in that community. In any case, again, thank you again so much for allowing me to share my latest.
Yes. I know, and it's time to head out. Yeah, so we'll just have to end it here, people. Yeah, we went through all the 4 steps
Yes,
for you
yes,
all. Yeah, and
yes.
we knew we had to run. So thank you so much, Ayu, for coming. It's been really a pleasure. You're a breath of fresh air. I love the information you shared. You're welcome to come back anytime,
Yay, thank
because
you
you
again.
open like 1,000 boxes. All the papers are flying out.
Yay, thank
Yeah,
you.
and to all our listeners, I want to thank you for stopping by. This was our smart guest, Dr. Ayu Saraswati. All her information will be in the description section, so please go in there and take a look. We've talked about the books. You'll find all the links there, and the excerpts and all the good stuff, so you can see. But you already got a few goodies here, so go and find more goodies in the description section. So until next time, goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.